In today's world, we face issues of grave importance and of immediate attention. With the persistent economic uprisings, the nuclear missile crisis in Iran, continual layoffs and increases in the unemployment rate, a corrupt federal financial system, climate change, and fierce opposition with regards to controversial social issues like gay marriage and abortion, we need a president who will stand up and fight.
People are looking for a champion. They want someone who's been fighting. When it came to health care, I brought tens of thousands of Americans to Washington to fight the unconstitutional individual mandate. I didn't praise it. When it came to cap and trade, I fought it with everything that was in me, including I introduced the Light Bulb Freedom of Choice Act so people could all purchase the light bulb of their choice.
Ha! Just kidding. This lady is crazy, and this video's primary focus is to show how crazy Michelle Bachmann actually is, and more importantly, how ill-equipped she is in becoming the next president of the United States of America. Let's first examine Ms. Bachmann's lack of historical knowledge of the country she plans on leading. Bachmann is quick to pull at the heartstrings of inspiration from her mostly creationist Bible Belt followers, but the facts are so off-putting it's hard to not laugh at her blatant fabrication of common American historical content. Here's a little excerpt of her speaking to news correspondent Anderson Cooper.
So here's what she said. You can judge for yourself. Speaking to a group called Iowans for Tax Relief, Congresswoman Bachmann seemed to whitewash our painful history over slavery. Instead of facing some of the less pretty facts of America's founding, she airbrushed herself some new history. Here she is talking about what people have faced throughout history when coming to America.
It didn't matter the color of their skin. It didn't matter their language. It didn't matter their economic status. It didn't matter whether they descended from nobility or whether they were of a higher class or a lower class. It made no difference. Once you got here, we were all the same.
Now, as much as we wish that was the case, as good as that sounds, that's simply not true. Whether she was talking about the founding of our nation or the experience of immigrants throughout our history, we were not treated all the same. Irish immigrants didn't feel the same walking past storefronts with signs reading "No Irish Need Apply." Japanese Americans didn't feel the same when they were placed in internment camps during World War II. And of course, enslaved Africans certainly didn't feel the same when they were brought here against their will. Michelle Bachmann mentioned slavery, but only to say it was something the Founding Fathers couldn't wait to get rid of.
We know there was slavery that was still tolerated when the nation began. We know that was an evil. And it was a scourge and a blot and a stain upon our history. But we also know that the very founders that wrote those documents worked tirelessly until slavery was no more in the United States. And I think it is high time that we recognize the contribution of our forebears who worked tirelessly, men like John Quincy Adams, who would not rest until slavery was extinguished in the country.
Now, again, Congresswoman Bachmann has her facts wrong. Many of the founders owned slaves. George Washington owned slaves. Thomas Jefferson, who wrote that all men are created equal, owned slaves. Jefferson was certainly conflicted about it, but others were not. And let's remember, the Constitution itself, as glorious a document as it is, the Constitution itself established a slave as 3/5 of a person. It was a political compromise. As for John Quincy Adams, well, Ms. Bachmann's right. He was a tireless campaigner against slavery, especially during his 17 years in Congress after leaving the White House. But he was not a founding father, as she sort of implied. He died years before emancipation in the Civil War. Rewriting history does no one any good, doesn't honor our real history, and it certainly doesn't help us learn about ourselves. We invited Congresswoman Bachmann on the program tonight. She declined. We asked her for a statement that might explain her comments. She never responded.
Bachmann is also notoriously known amongst her peers for falsifying information on a variety of subjects, whether it be half-truths or blatant lying. She is also well known for never answering tough questions and instead pussyfooting around until the host just gives up. Here are some prime examples of Michelle's failure at speaking honestly.
The worst offender of all.
You've campaigned on cutting the deficit, cutting spending, not raising taxes like a lot of Republican, a lot of Tea Party candidates. There haven't been a lot of specifics, though, about what programs you would want to cut to really get the kind of savings that we need. Republican Paul Ryan has suggested sharp cuts in Medicare and Social Security. Are you willing to make cuts there?
I think we know that just within a day or so, the President of the United States will be taking a trip over to India that is expected to cost the taxpayers $200 million a day. He's taking 2,000 people with him. He'll be renting out over 870 rooms in India, and these are five-star hotel rooms at the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel. This is the kind of over-the-top spending. It's a very small example, Anderson.
The White House is saying that idea that this is a $200 million boondoggle is completely overstated, that number, it's wildly inflated, those numbers.
And that may be what that White House is stating, but again, we have never seen a trip at this level before, of this level of excess. And I think it's not a good signal to send to the American people when the American people are, quite frankly, struggling right now with high job losses.
But you know that the president needs security overseas. You wouldn't begrudge any president that. And frankly, no one really knows the cost, because for security reasons they don't disclose the cost. So this idea that it's $200 million, whatever, is simply made up. Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann. Now, after the interview, we did some checking on the claim that President Obama's trip to India is costing $200 million a day, which seemed like a lot when she brought it up. Congresswoman Bachmann said it's in news reports. It may be on the internet. That doesn't actually make it true, though. It turns out the source of this unsubstantiated claim is not from Politico. It's from an Indian news report, and the original report is actually from an anonymous Indian source, allegedly an Indian provincial official. How he would know how much President Obama's trip is costing, I'm not sure. After the interview, we went back, asked the White House for further details. They said, quote, "The numbers reported in this article have no basis in reality. Due to security concerns, we're unable to outline details associated with security procedures and costs, but it's safe to say these numbers are wildly inflated." As for how inflated, we can get some idea from Bill Clinton's similar Asian trip as president, which is widely considered the most expensive ever. The estimated bottom line for that trip, $50 million, and not per day, but for the entire trip.
In questioning the idea of evolution, there is a controversy among scientists about whether evolution is a fact or not. Patty has reached a conclusion that evolution is a fact. There are hundreds and hundreds of scientists, many of them holding Nobel Prizes, who believe in intelligent design.
I want to ask you about something else. A lot of your critics say you have been very fast and loose with the truth. The PolitiFact, which is a website that won a Pulitzer, did an analysis of 23 statements that you made recently. Of these 23, only one they said was completely true. 7 they call pants on fire kind of falsehoods. 4 were barely true, and 2 were half true. How do you answer that criticism? Because here's one of them. You said on the record there'd been only one offshore oil drilling permit during the Obama administration, and in fact at that time there'd been 270. How do you explain that?
Well, I think that what's clear more than anything is the fact that President Obama has not been issuing the permits that he should have been issuing on offshore drilling.
Well,
that's why
more
we're in
than
the problem that we're
300
in.
now.
Well,
at that time there'd been 200 and something, and you said there'd been only one.
But as far as drilling goes, we hadn't been drilling what we need to. That's why we just saw this week.
But that's different, isn't it?
Well, that's why this week it's ironic and sad that the president released all of the oil from the Strategic Oil Reserve, because the president doesn't have an energy policy.
Do you think that was a good move?
He has a politically correct environmental policy. It was a very bad move.
Just quickly, though, the original question I asked you is all of these statements that you have made that have later proven to be sort of true or totally false in some cases. What's your answer when people say that to you? Do you feel you have misled people?
No, I haven't misled people at all. I think the question would be asked of President Obama. When you told the American people that if we borrow $1 trillion from other countries and spend it on a stimulus, that we won't have unemployment go above 8%, and today as we are sitting here, it's 9.1%, and the economy is tanking. That is what's serious. That's a very serious statement that the president made. Did he mislead the American people? Not only did he mislead the American people, he's caused our economy to go down to depths that we haven't seen. That's what's serious.
Again, I have to say, Congresswoman, I asked you a question, and you, to my knowledge, I don't believe you answered it, but I want to thank you. I know you're...
They have cable TV in their apartments. They're listening to Al Jazeera, and they're being encouraged and prompted to go ahead and start these riots all over France. There's a movement afoot that's occurring, and part of that is this whole philosophical idea of multicultural diversity, which on the face sounds wonderful. Let's appreciate and value everyone's cultures. But guess what? Not all cultures are equal. Not all values are equal. And one thing that we're seeing is that in the midst of this violence that's being encouraged by Al Jazeera and by by the jihadists that's occurring is that we are seeing that those who are coming into France, which had a beautiful culture, the French culture is actually diminished. It's going away. And just with the population in France, they are losing Western Europeans, and it's being taken over by a Muslim ethnic. Not that Muslims are bad, but they are not assimilating. And that's what I had mentioned in my previous response, is that America is a great nation with great values. We are equal opportunity for all. And it's because we all came here and we came together as one. Out of many, one. Multicultural diversity says out of one, many. And if we go with tribalism, we will not long be one nation united under God.
And in Psycho Talk tonight, we already know that House Intelligence Committee member Michelle Bachmann, well, she isn't very good at history or foreign policy. Bachmann said the first shots of the Revolutionary War were fired in New Hampshire. And she said people are worried about the rise of the Soviet Union. But Bachmann doesn't let her ignorance stop her from wild speculation about international affairs. Yesterday, she was fear-mongering about a second Cuban Missile Crisis.
There's reports that have come out that Cuba has been working with another terrorist organization called Hezbollah. And Hezbollah is potentially looking at wanting to be a part of missile sites in Iran. And, of course, when you're 90 miles offshore from Florida, you don't want to entertain the prospect of hosting bases or sites where Hezbollah could have training camps or perhaps have missile sites or weapon sites in Cuba. This would be foolish.
No fear-mongering there. Of course, Bachmann is way off the mark. Hold it right there. If this was the case, do you think that President Obama would be mentioning this in the media at all? She was apparently referring to an unsourced report in an Italian newspaper picked up by conservative blogs, but the report didn't mention anything about missiles. That part was a Bachmann special. This tactic is nothing new for the Congresswoman from Minnesota. It's just like when she said the HPV vaccine causes mental retardation. She hears something she thinks can be helping her politically, and she just runs with it, whether it's true or not. And in Bachmann's case, it's usually not true. Her fear-mongering about Hezbollah missiles in Cuba is reckless psycho talk.
Michelle Bachmann has become such a joke amongst media outlets that they outwardly mock the presidential hopeful both openly on air and directly to her face. I mean, it's hard to believe that this woman has gotten so far in politics with so little intelligence and legitimate political influence. It's comical that this bimbo is even being considered for election.
Let me ask you, Congresswoman Bachmann, are you hypnotized tonight? Has someone hypnotized you? Because no matter what I ask you, you give the same answer. Are you hypnotized? Has someone put you under a trance tonight? Did you give me the same answer no matter what question I put to you?
I think the American people are the ones that finally are speaking tonight. We're coming out of our trance. Really, we're coming out of our nightmare.
Okay,
so
well,
I think people are thrilled tonight. I imagine that thrill is probably maybe not quite so tingly on your leg anymore.
I know you get to that. Your sign holder has already raised that issue. Well, someday we'll have you on the show again, and we'll get to the investigations. But congratulations. I know you will never be defeated on your philosophy, which is to investigate everyone for everything.
Which is free markets and embrace the principles of our founders.
Okay, thank you very much, Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann, who seems to be in a trance, but thank you. Back to you, Keith.
Cutting back on foreign aid is one thing. Being reimbursed by nations that we have liberated is another. We should look to Iraq and Libya to reimburse us for part of what we have done to liberate these nations.
Did you hear those cheers in the background? Michelle and the GOP crowd think that we should charge Iraq and Libya for liberating them. Where do I even begin here? I mean, let me remind Michelle of a few things. We invaded Iraq based on faulty intelligence rigged by war hawks. Yes, the U.S. and other coalition forces got rid of Saddam Hussein, who was by all measures a bad man, who, let's not forget, used to be our friend at one point. But whatever, he was contained. He posed no threat to the United States.
Lastly, the woman is just a really annoying person, from her face to her personality to her obnoxious voice. Take a listen.
Bachmann, since she was referenced by you.
But Anderson.
Okay. I did. Number one. He still has time. Sorry, he still has time. Number two. He still has time. Let me finish. He still has time. Now, there are a lot of things that
Anderson.
Yeah, Congresswoman Bachmann.
Anderson.
Your campaigns are telling us we have to end. It's time. I'm sorry.
No. Anderson.
It's your campaigns.
Anderson.
If you want to defile your campaigns, go ahead. Congresswoman Bachmann, 30 seconds.
The good news is.
You want that as your president? Didn't think so. The fact that this woman even has a following is a direct reflection of the stupidity of the large percentage of American people who are so ill-advised on political issues that Michelle Bachmann actually has a fighting chance at being elected. That being said, it is most important that the educated citizens cast their vote so that someone as unqualified as her doesn't slip their way into the White House.